As a teacher, I almost turned off the OA in the first episode. Steve punching a wall, naked, right after having unemotional sex and right before being accused of bullying again at school, was more teenage angst than I wanted to witness. What happened to my TV shield, my escape from reality into fiction? Like his math teacher, I wanted to put Steve away and forget about him. But then a mysterious neighbor assured Mrs. Broderick Allen that she could make a difference if she'd let down her guard, face reality, and give Steve another chance. This stranger was the OA. Thank goodness I was still listening too. By the final episode, I was recommending this show to every teacher I know. It breaks some rules, it makes some viewers uncomfortable, and it encourages us to do the same. Paired with Brené Brown's Daring Greatly, Netflix's The OA becomes a fable teaching how vulnerability can banish crippling shields and lead to more wholehearted living. While studying the human need for connection, researcher Brené Brown discovered the universal presence of shame, the fear of not being worthy of connection. She sorted data to learn how some people are consistently able to feel worthy of belonging, while others succumb to their fear. Among the wholehearted, she discovered a pattern of embracing vulnerability.
They were willing to let go of who they thought they should be in order to be who they were. They believed that what made them vulnerable made them beautiful.
By courageously risking shame in order to live authentically, people who embrace vulnerability experience deeper trust, love, and belonging. In the OA, Prairie Johnson goes through a 7-year ordeal that lets her discover a similar truth and teach it to others. Whether entirely real or imagined, Prairie's imprisonment at the hands of Dr. Hunter Happ brings her to face her shame and become a more authentic self. Her fellow captives' first words bring her shame to the surface.
And as you think about every step that led you here, you'll eventually realize it's no one's fault but your own.
At her lowest point, Prairie sobs on the floor in shame after botching their first attempt at escape. The other captives are not much better off. Scott wallows in self-pity about his drug-fueled isolation and illness. Rachel cries about causing the death of her younger brother. Homer wants only to prove to his young son that he didn't abandon him. And latecomer Renata blames Homer for her capture after she seduced him nearly on sight. But by risking trust in one another, compassion for themselves, belief in the unbelievable, and collective effort toward a goal they know is virtually impossible, all 5 captives find love and hope in their cells at the bottom of a mine. Though Scott wakes up from an 11-hour death in an unapologetic Jesus pose, as if it were a 2-day cleanse, Prairie's transformation is even more complete. She entered her dungeon as blind, bundled Prairie and leaves as the sighted, scantily clad OA. And of course, no film transformation could be complete without a haircut. In her book, Daring Greatly, Brené Brown points out the shields many people choose rather than risking vulnerability. Perfectionism, numbing, and cynical distancing are among the most common shields she describes. Released into her crumbling hometown suburb, OA selects 5 companions to become collaborators on a shadowy, life-altering project. Each new member still clings to a shield, but together they ultimately find vulnerability and its wholehearted power. Steve, the first selected, is also the most thoroughly guarded. He distances himself from others through violence. He numbs his feelings with alcohol and relishes the power of distributing numbing drugs to others. His moment of vulnerability, asking his crush to stay and watch a movie, is rejected in favor of sex, which she calls practice for someone she really loves. Even his parents have threatened to send him away. Before OA's intervention, Steve seems not only shielded, but armed against vulnerability and shame. Betty Broderick Allen, Steve's math teacher, has shielded herself from her brother's death by pretending it hasn't happened. She did not attend his funeral, won't return his lawyer's calls, and listens to an old voicemail from him on repeat. OA recognizes this shield and asks Betty to confront her loss by giving Steve another chance in school. She models vulnerability by telling Betty her true name, OA. Once Betty adopts the similar name, BBA, her courageous vulnerability leads to closing her brother's estate, getting help from her students to clean out his apartment, remembering her brother's life and accepting his death, and finally rescuing Steve at the cost of her $50,000 inheritance. These acts of vulnerability in turn help Steve realize he is worthy of belonging. The rest of the 5 companions are guarded in different ways. French uses perfectionism and cocaine as shields against his wayward mother. Jesse and Buck, though connected to Steve through drugs, turn out to be the least shielded against vulnerability. Jesse's drug use is reluctant and dulls the loss of both his parents, but he's willing to talk about his feelings. Buck bucks gender expectations, living as he feels rather than by what's expected, and takes the risks to sing, give advice to French, and touch the scars on OA's back. OA asks them all,
"You have to pretend to trust me until you actually do."
and to leave their front doors open, a sign of vulnerability and trust in the community and in their work. Their work, as it turns out, is a kind of reality-altering Tai Chi. Many viewers have criticized the choice to use choreography as the secret code to OA's goal, but for this damaged group, caged in the shielded world of high school, dancing is the perfect symbol of vulnerability. Learning synchronized moves in the privacy of a dark abandoned house is one thing. Steve even manages to see it as a step toward his personal training career. Committed practice and accepting feedback are further steps that lower shields and risk shame. But the team perseveres midnight by midnight. At OA's most vulnerable, parents show up and the children have one last chance to retreat behind their shields. But even individually, they are stronger than before. A set of books invites them to believe their project has been a sham, but Buck clings hopefully to one about angels. BBA loses her job, but
like I said, I brought my car in for a tune-up. I can go anywhere.
Steve is back in school, but has a girlfriend who doesn't reject his vulnerability. Jesse's pot habit has been transformed into a literal cushion. French, most distraught by their loss, has been assured that his time was not wasted, that he helped OA survive by shouldering some of her trauma. And though they could all have survived, stronger but confused, the climax demonstrates the ultimate power of vulnerability. It's a teacher's worst nightmare, a school cafeteria, the archetypal setting of shame and shields, an anonymous teenage shooter, a young man who's chosen literal shields and ammunition against the vulnerability of adolescence. While adults and students scream, flee, and cower under lunch tables, while the shooter surveys the scene and chooses victims, the OA's 5 apprentices find each other's eyes across the chaos. They nod, terrified but united. In one motion, they leap to their feet and begin their choreographed dance. It's the first time we've seen the complete sequence, and now it's in a wide circle surrounding the dumbstruck gunman. The cafeteria quiets as all look on in awe. Steve, BBA, French, Buck, and Jesse are entirely synchronized, entirely committed to their dance. They are embracing vulnerability by dancing in a high school cafeteria, by trusting each other and the woman who may have made up her entire past, and by putting themselves directly in front of an automatic weapon. Their vulnerability wins. Critics and viewers, like me, are avidly responding to the compelling and imperfect vision of the OA. But for those of us who are ready to find connection through vulnerability, plot gaps and cliffhangers are no deterrent. Like Steve, BBA, French, Buck, and Jesse, we can suspend disbelief and accept more important truths about courage and compassion. We can read the final episode as a fable, teaching us how to put down our shields and become our truer selves. How magical that Britt Marling, who plays OA, was also part of the creative team that built this series. Whether intentionally or intuitively, Britt Marling and Zal Batmanglij embraced their own vulnerability to create a model for Brené Brown's theory. The result is a gift to teens and teachers. Perhaps we too can take back the high school cafeteria and learn to dance.